Today I want to share with you a transformative experience in my religious life. A journey that took me from confusion and doubt to clarity and conviction. From being a passive follower to becoming a more enlightened and grounded Shia of the al-Bayt. I want to tell you about a book that had a significant impact on how I understand my faith, my identity, my connection to the al-Bayt, peace be upon them. This book gave me clarity when I was drowning in confusion. It gave me strength when my faith was being weakened by doubts. And most importantly, it connected me directly to the pure original teachings of our Imams in a way that no contemporary scholar ever did. This book is The Divine Guide in Early Shi'ism by Mohammad Ali Amir-Moezzi. Mohammad Ali Amir-Moezzi is a distinguished French-Iranian academic Shia scholar and historian of Islam. And I know what some of you might think, an academic book written by a Western Shia scholar? How can this strengthen my faith? I had the same question, but what I discovered was nothing short of revolutionary. This book didn't give me the opinions of a modern academic. Instead, it opened the door to our own classical sources of Hadith, al-Kafi, Basa'ir, al-Darajat, the earliest compilations of our Imams' teachings, and showed me what they actually say in their full depth and power, without the filters and distortions that have accumulated over centuries. What I discovered was that this scholar had done something that our own contemporary scholars refused to do. He actually read our earliest Hadith collections sincerely and systematically. He didn't approach them with suspicion or with a predetermined rational framework. He simply asked, what did the Imams actually teach? In his own words from the preface, Amir-Moezzi points out something shocking. He says more than a century has been dedicated to scholarly study of Shi'ism. Nevertheless, when it comes to early Imamism, the doctrine professed by the historical Imams of Shi'ism, we must surprisingly admit that we still have no clear idea. Think about that. More than a century of academic scholarship, and we still don't understand what our Imams actually taught. Why? Because, as he explains, there is a constant confusion between the teachings of the Imams reported by the oldest compilations of Imamite traditions and the ideas professed by later Imamite thinkers and scholars. Before reading this book, I was confused, uncertain, constantly questioning. I had been raised in the modern tradition where everything has to be rational, where hadith are constantly weakened and questioned, where the supernatural dimensions of our truth are explained away or minimized. Does this sound familiar to you? Have you felt this confusion? Have you wondered why our Imams seem so ordinary in the way that they are presented today, when the Hadith describe them as beings of divine light, possessors of cosmic knowledge, guides, appointed even before the creation of the world? Reading the Divine Guide connected me firmly with the teachings of al-Bayt and made me a more confident, grounded, and enlightened Shia. And today I want to share this transformation with you because I believe every single Shia Muslim needs to read this book. It's not an exaggeration to say that this book might be one of the most important works for understanding authentic Shiaism in our time. I'm going to share with you 10 reasons why and how the Divine Guide transformed my understanding and practice of Shi'ism. These are insights that changed how I understand our religion and how I navigate the confusion in our community today. But before I share with you the reasons, I need to clear some fundamental misunderstandings about the scholarship of Amir-Moezzi. I know some of you might have heard criticisms about him and his work. The most common attack is that he promotes ghulu, meaning exaggerated beliefs, by accepting weak and inauthentic hadith about the supernatural powers and the cosmic role of the Imams. And I'm going to address each of these criticisms. First of all, People don't realize that ghulu, by definition, are those beliefs for which there are in fact no hadith in our early collections. So, how can any belief based on hadith be ghulu? And Amir-Moezzi isn't adding any of his personal beliefs or adding anything that is not in the hadith. He is simply presenting what's already in al-Kafi, in Basa'ir, al-Darajat, in our earliest books. If that's ghulu, then we are accusing Sheikh Kulaini, Safar, Nubani, Saduk, and all our early scholars of ghulu. The real question is, why are modern scholars so eager to deny what our authentic sources clearly state? But unfortunately, applying this label of ghulu has become a weapon, a tool to dismiss any hadith that doesn't fit the rationalist agenda. Secondly, the criticism that he is following inauthentic or weak hadith is particularly ironic. The book actually exposes how the entire methodology of weakening hadith is itself an innovation, borrowed from Sunni scholarship. The whole system of hadith criticism in usuli thought is borrowed from those who rejected our Imams in the first place. Amir-Moezzi's methodology is in fact actually more rigorous than his critics, because he examines the earliest sources, he looks at the totality of the corpus, he identifies consistent patterns across multiple narrations. He's not cherry-picking isolated weak hadith. He's showing what the mainstream of early Shia tradition actually taught. Lastly, does Amir-Moezzi have a hidden agenda to turn us into some kind of Sufi saints or whirling dervishes, rhythmically chanting liturgies? Is he introducing new rituals and practices? Is he promoting the practice of magic, sorcery, or occultism? These are ridiculous allegations leveled against him, when in fact the entirety of his work is just a deep, methodical and thorough exploration of our hadith, and nothing more than that. Okay, so now having said that, and with that out of the way, let's start with the 10 reasons how this book transformed my faith and made me a stronger and a more authentic Shia. Reason number 1, it restored my complete faith in our Hadith heritage. For years, I had been hearing from our scholars that we need to authenticate Hadith, that many narrations in our books are weak or unreliable, that we should question and doubt our transmitted heritage. This created a crisis in my faith. If we can't trust what the Imam said, if we don't believe that the Imams preserved their own teachings, then what do we have left? Amir-Moezzi points out that the methodology of weakening hadith was developed much later, influenced by Sunni approaches and Mu'tazilite rationalism. The early Shia community didn't approach hadith this way. They preserved the teachings of the Imams with utmost care and respect and transmitted them faithfully. Our canonical collections represent an authentic preservation of the Imam's teachings. Think about this again. If we can't trust what was transmitted from our Imams, if we can't trust the systems that the Imam used to transmit these teachings, then what exactly is our religion based on? The opinions of fallible scholars? The rationalist methodology borrowed from the Mu'tazila? No. Our religion is based on the divinely guided words of the 14 infallibles, and based on the conviction that these individuals preserved their teachings for us. The book demonstrates through systematic analysis that when we examine the earliest sources without later rationalist filters, we find a coherent, consistent body of teachings. The problem isn't with the hadith. The problem is with later scholars who became uncomfortable with the supernatural, esoteric dimensions of these teachings and started developing methods to dismiss them, to weaken them. This book is firmly grounded in hadith, not in the opinions of later theologians or philosophers, but in the actual words of our Imams, from sources like al-Kafi, Basa'ir, al-Darajat, and other early compilations, it opened my eyes to the history of our Hadith collection and made me realize a fundamental truth. Questioning the authenticity of our Hadith completely collapses our foundation. Without the preservation of these teachings, religion becomes a lost cause, and we are all lost. And I have a separate video titled "Without Hadith, Islam is Lost," where I present compelling arguments on the critical importance of Hadith preservation. Reason number 2, it revealed the true nature of Imamate. Before reading this book, I thought of the Imams primarily as political leaders who were unjustly prevented from ruling, or as great scholars and jurists. This is how modern scholarship often presents them, as essentially very learned, very pious human beings with political legitimacy. The Divine Guide opened my eyes to something far more profound. The Imam is not just a political leader or a scholar. The Imam is a cosmic necessity, a channel of divine guidance, a being who exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Amir-Moezzi traces through the early sources how the Imams describe their own pre-existence as divine light, created before the creation of the world. He shows how they possessed complete knowledge, not just of religious law, but of the hidden meanings of revelation, of past and future events, of the secrets of creation. He demonstrates that the Imams describe themselves as having supernatural abilities, not as miracles just to prove their status, but as natural consequences of who they essentially were. This isn't exaggeration, this isn't ghulu. This is what's in our own books. This is what al-Kafi reports. But later scholars, uncomfortable with these dimensions, either ignored these hadith or tried to interpret them away. Amir-Moezzi simply presents what these sources actually say in a systematic and comprehensive manner. Understanding this transformed my relationship with the Imams. They're not distant historical figures. They are living cosmic realities, guides who exist beyond the limitations of time and space, connected to us through chains of divine light and knowledge. Reason number 3, it clarified the true role of Aql. This point is absolutely crucial, and it's where I saw most clearly how modern scholarship has deviated from authentic Shi'ism. For years, I heard that Aql is one of the 4 sources of Islamic law, equal to Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma. The meaning of Aql has been falsely projected as reason or rational thought. I was taught that we must subject everything to rational analysis, and that if something seems irrational, we should doubt or interpret it. Amir-Moezzi's book showed me what Aql actually meant in early Shi'ism. And more importantly, the book clearly delineates the role and boundaries of Aql, using the explanations from our Imams. Through careful analysis of Hadith, he demonstrates that Aql is not independent human reasoning. It is a divine faculty, a light implanted in the believer by Allah to submit to the authority of the Imam. Aql is not an independent source of law. Aql is not a tool for questioning revelation. Rather, it is a tool through which revelation is understood and accepted. This understanding liberates a person from the tyranny of the modern rationalist standards, where everything has to make sense. Our beliefs are esoteric and supra-rational. If a hadith contradicts current scientific theories, we need to question the theories, not the hadith. After all, most scientific beliefs are just theories that change with time, while the words of the Imams are eternal truths. This is completely different from how modern scholars use reason today. They have actually imported Mu'tazilite concepts of rationalism, where human reason becomes independent and can even judge revelation. The book traces this influence historically and shows how it corrupted authentic Shia epistemology. The Imams didn't want us to rationalize away their teachings. They wanted us to use the divine light within us to recognize their authority and submit to their guidance, even when it transcends ordinary rational understanding. Reason number 4, it taught me to embrace the esoteric dimensions of our faith. The book reveals the deeply esoteric nature of early Shi'ism. The Imams constantly spoke about batin, hidden meanings, about secrets that could only be understood by those whose hearts Allah had tested for faith. There is a powerful hadith that Amir-Moezzi quotes from al-Kafi, and it struck me deeply. The Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him and his family, said, "The hadith of the Al Muhammad is difficult and becomes more difficult. None believes in it except an angel of proximity, or a prophet sent to men, or a servant whose heart has been tested by Allah for Iman." The teachings of the al-Bayt are not meant to be easy or immediately comprehensible through ordinary rational analysis. They are difficult, they require faith, they require submission, they require a heart that has been tested and purified. Our early sources have teachings about supernatural realities, about hidden knowledge, about dimensions of existence that transcend ordinary understanding. And it is obligatory to believe in the non-rational aspects of our hadith. Yes, our Imams performed miracles, they had knowledge of the unseen, they could travel instantly across distances, they knew the languages of animals and plants, they had access to divine books and scrolls. If a hadith describes supernatural events, we don't need to doubt it. These are authentic teachings preserved for us, and our job is to submit to them with faith, not to subject them to our limited rational judgment. Reason number 5, it exposed the corruption of rationalist theology. One of the most important things this book does is that it defines rationalism, explains its history, and reveals its dangers. The modern Shia scholarship has incorporated Mu'tazilite rationalist ideology into the core of their school. The same Mu'tazila that our Imams condemned. Amir-Moezzi uncovers this evil influence and shows how it corrupted our original teachings. Iblis was the first one to use rationalism to justify his superiority over Adam, and he based his theory on reasoning and rational understanding. If rational thinking alone could lead us to divine truths, there would be no need for Allah to send prophets and Imams to guide us. And all these great intellectuals of our world wouldn't be atheists and polytheists. They would have reached the truth through their great rational minds. Reason number 6, it gave me tools to identify innovations, bid'ah. Once we understand the authentic early teachings, we suddenly have a compass. We can evaluate any practice, any belief, any claim by asking, is this based on the hadith of the Imams, or is it a later innovation? This book helps us realize that so many practices and beliefs in modern Shia communities have no basis in the teachings of the Imams. They are innovations that crept in over centuries, often borrowed from Sunni practice or developed by scholars disconnected from the original sources. For every religious practice, we need to ask the right questions. Where is this practice in the hadith? What did the Imams actually say about this? Did they ever order or recommend us to do this? This doesn't mean that we become rigid or extreme. Rather, we develop an ability to distinguish between what the Imams taught and what scholars later added. And realizing that the true deen means following the Imams, not following the innovations of scholars, no matter how popular those innovations might be. Reason number 7, it showed me that correct Aqeedah, belief, is everything. One of the most important lessons from the Divine Guide is about the importance of correct belief. The book demonstrates through numerous hadith that the Imams emphasized Aqeedah, correct understanding of fundamental realities, above everything else. No doubt we need to perform our obligatory rituals, but it's not enough to just perform them correctly. If our fundamental understanding of who the Imams are, what their status is, their role in divine guidance, if this understanding is wrong, then everything else is built on a faulty foundation. And here's the crucial point. Correct Aqeedah must be based purely, solely, exclusively on the hadith of the Imams. When scholars start developing Aqeedah based on rational theology or philosophical speculation or what seems reasonable to them, this is when corruption enters. Amir-Moezzi's book gave me a clear hadith-based understanding of fundamental beliefs, the nature of the Imam, the nature of divine guidance, the relationship between the apparent and hidden dimensions of revelation, the cosmic role of the al-Bayt. This is the foundation. Once we get this right, everything else follows. Reason number 8, it freed me from blind following of the clerical establishment. The book made me realize that the modern clerical system, the hierarchical religious establishment, is actually foreign to authentic Shiaism. The Imams were not clerics. They didn't establish a clerical class. The early Shia community was not organized around a clergy. What the Imams did was transmit knowledge, ilm, directly to their followers through hadith. The clerical system developed much later, and while it may have served certain functions, it has also become a barrier between the Shias and the direct teachings of the Imams. Clerics often have institutional interests, like maintaining their authority, their followership, their positions. This can lead them to suppress or reinterpret teachings that might threaten their positions, their authority. Amir-Moezzi's book connects you directly with the Imam's teachings. You don't need a mediating cleric to tell you what to believe. You can read what the Imams actually said. You can verify the claims. You can think critically. A true scholar, as I learned, guides you to the Imams and their teachings, whereas a false scholar invites you to himself, to his views, to his authority. After reading this book, I could tell the difference. Reason number 9, it prepared me for the return of Imam al-Mahdi. Peace be upon him, and may Allah hasten his reappearance. Perhaps most importantly, this book prepared me spiritually and intellectually for the return of our Imam. By purifying my faith from innovations, grounding me in authentic hadith, and helping me understand the true nature of the Imam, it has made me ready to serve Al-Qaim when he returns. Think about it. When the Imam returns, will he recognize those who follow innovations as his true Shia? Or will he recognize those who preserved his and his father's teachings and who rejected the corruption of rationalist ideologies? The book makes it clear. The Imam will identify as his true followers those who maintained the original teachings, not those who corrupted them later with innovations. They are those who held firm to the original teachings, even when it made them a minority, even when it brought criticism and even isolation. This gave urgency to my quest for authentic knowledge. This isn't just academic, it's about our eternal salvation and our readiness to serve the Imam. Reason number 10, it taught me that truth is often with the minority. Finally, the book helped me understand something crucial. Being on the path of truth often means being in the minority. It means facing criticism and even isolation. The majority of Shias today accept the rationalized, sanitized version of Shiaism. But the Imams themselves said that their true followers would always be few. They said their teachings would be difficult and that few would accept them. This book taught me the beauty of minority views. The Imams themselves were a minority. Their true followers have always been a minority. But remember, staying on the truth is never easy. The majority is not always right. There is beauty in being among the few who preserve the authentic tradition. The Hadith tells us that when the Qaim returns, he will teach things that even the Shia will find strange because they've forgotten the original teachings. Amir-Moezzi's work represents minority scholarship, not because it's extreme, but because it refuses to compromise the authentic teachings for the sake of popularity. It presents what the sources actually say, even when it is uncomfortable or challenging. We have to make a choice. Do we want to be comfortable following the crowd, accepting their innovations, and trusting the religious establishment? Or do we want to be a true Shia of the al-Bayt, grounded in their actual teachings, even if it means standing alone? Closing remarks. My dear brothers and sisters, we are living in critical times. Shaitan's grip on the entire world is even more stronger. Misguidance and deviation is everywhere. The return of our Imam is near, and we need to prepare ourselves. But we cannot meet him while drowning in innovations, while doubting our Hadith heritage, while following corrupted teachings. We need to purify our faith, return to the sources, and understand who the Imams really are and what they really taught. If you are feeling confused about your faith, or if you're uncertain about what it means to be a Shia, if you feel disconnected from the Imams, and if you're drowning in the contradictions and innovations of modern Shia practice, this book can be your lifeline. It is a very different book. It's a revival of our authentic tradition, a restoration of our true identity, a guide back to the original path of the al-Bayt. That is why I decided to do a series of podcast videos on this book, where I systematically go through the material in the hope that it will be more accessible to you and, more importantly, to inspire you to take this content seriously. We don't have to blindly accept whatever is in the book. You can check the references, look up the hadith, and easily verify the claims. But don't let anyone prevent you from accessing this knowledge. Don't let accusations of ghulu or following weak hadith scare you away. These are the same tactics that have been used throughout history to keep people away from authentic teachings. Yes, it's a challenging read. Yes, it will shake many of your assumptions. Yes, you might face criticism for accepting its teachings. But remember the hadith. The teachings of the Ali Muhammad are difficult and become more difficult. They are not meant for everyone, only for those whose hearts have been tested by Allah for Iman. May Allah guide us all to the truth. May He connect us firmly with the teachings of the al-Bayt, and may He count us among the true Shias who will be in the front lines of the 12th Imam's army. May Allah hasten His reappearance. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.